And we're starting in 3, 2, 1. What is up, Cubes fam? I'm back with you. And welcome back to the channel. And this is going to be one of those topics where I definitely want to go into depths with other people about this one. But today I'm going to be hitting a bit of a vein that I've been on a kick of a lot lately. This is going to be kind of an offshoot of the Pheasable Life topic, because this is going to be talking about theoretical life that is said to already exist in some circles. And that is, today I want to talk about the feasibility of the supposed Annunaki. For those of you who don't know, the Annunaki are a supposed species that are also native to our solar system, but basically live on planet X, which is dubbed Nibiru. This goes down a really weird, I don't want to quite say conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but it really does. But I'm not going to do too much digging on all the details about all the different conspiracy theories, and because some of the stuff really does get far out there. But I want to talk today about the feasibility of having a practically extra system planetoid the way that that's supposed to be, and the feasibility of life therein. And I might also I know the way I bounce, so I might also kind of expand this to any life within our own solar system in general. But specifically today, I wanted to sort of take the what details I know about the Nibiru thing and sort of expand on that. So for those of you who need the crash course, listen up. Supposedly that there is a planet, much like the theorized planet X, that has been dubbed Nibiru, that exists for the most part at the far extremes of the solar system, spending most of its time out beyond the Kuiper Belt or within the Kuiper Belt, which means it would receive a lot of gravitational stresses. It would receive a lot of meteoric bombardments during its time going through the belt. There is kind of sparse spaces once you get outside of the belt between where the Oort clouds start getting really dense and where the asteroid belt starts densening up. It's kind of like where the dust got cleared out because it either clumped together as the asteroid belt forming the Kuiper Belt, or kind of got pushed off a little bit as the sun ignited properly. Kind of like blown off like a puff of smoke, almost. Oh, so yeah. So the feasibility of sustainable life on a planet that is that far away from the sun is actually not as terrible as one might think. Assuming that it always had that crazy level of orbit, it probably would be made of something very dense, and there has been evidence to suggest a large, dense celestial body out in the Kuiper Belt, affecting the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. So it is very possible that something could be very dense and have a large enough core or a hot enough core, just from different kinds of radiation, depending on how dense it is, what makes up its core, all that fun stuff. It's very possible that from a heat perspective, a outer solar system planet could sustain life. We've seen evidence of gravitational friction generating heat, allowing for liquid water on moons, like it's either Io or Europa. One of those has liquid water underneath of its surface thanks to gravitational stresses, because it's getting yanked back and forth by the passage of moons and planets. Um, and there's no evidence for or against Nibiru having um, a moon, so it is very possible that that could also help, because with a situation like that, um, the gravitational stresses would actually help keep the planet warm. Um, yeah. So as far as the heat perspective goes, and so the other thing I guess I should say about Nibiru is that supposedly, according to what's been said about it, it does intersect with our orbit every few thousand years. So it does slowly work its way into the solar system. So that kind of speaks to, because it's such a ridiculously long um, orbit time, that kind of speaks to long periods of progression of like colder climate, warmer climate, colder climate, warmer climate. Um, and so there might have been a very large swath of time for assuming intelligent life, but, assuming the Anunnaki evolved there. And not somewhere else in the solar system moved there, but assuming they evolved there, then it stands to reason that there would be a good swath of time during the warm parts of the planet's life cycle for them to kind of make ready as things would get colder. Having such a long cycle, though, is a whole different matter. I mean, I could speak for days about the Anunnaki stuff, because this all goes into like uh, extension of biological life stuff and stuff too. If I really wanted to go down the rabbit hole, anybody who's interested in hearing a lot about specifically about the extension of life, as it's based off of the stories that you hear about the Anunnaki, there's actually a really good book. I don't remember who it's by. It's called Immortality and Gods. One of the things that you follow the rabbit hole down is that the Anunnaki are one of those species where people believe them to be the ancient gods because they were advanced to civilization dealing with ancient humanity. But not going to touch that right now. But it stands to reason that in the early days of evolution, that they would be able to, for one, that they would have some knowledge of the planet's ecosystem and how it was going to work, and that it was going to get warmer, and then it was going to get colder. With such a slow orbit, I think there would be plenty of time as things were starting to warm up for them to develop a culture, understand that things were changing, understand possibly that things were going to keep changing. Because I think a Nibiruan year is like, I think that it supposedly orbits once every 5,000 years. So a Nibiruan year being 5,000 years would give a lot of time for development. And it stands to reason that if life is going to develop in a place like that, that they're able to survive. It's very possible that Nibiru could be partially hollow, assuming it exists. It could be partially hollow. And that, yeah, it doesn't also have a denser core to allow for the gravitational effect, but that perhaps the main inhabiting area of the planet is not surface. Because if it was the surface, you're constantly dealing with asteroid bombardments and solar winds. But if you're underneath the surface, you don't have all those problems. You'll have plenty of ability to keep your water supply safe. Water is much more likely, especially with a molten core. You're not as worried about the effects of radiation from the solar wind, even though they're probably used to it. And you're not as affected by the outside changes as the seasons can be affected here on Earth. It's a very interesting idea. We tease along the idea of the hollow Earth, but the fact remains that there's no evidence to suggest that a planet can't exist like that. We already see planets with, or not planets, I guess, but moons, planetoids, with liquid water underneath their surface. I got paused. All right, and we're back. Sorry about that. But like with Europa and with Io and with Enceladus, I think it's Io as well. Enceladus was the other one I was thinking of earlier, though. With Europa and with Enceladus, we see evidence of subterranean oceans. So there's no real reason why there can't be also subterranean caverns that might be habitable under the right conditions. Given that we've seen evidence even here on Earth of remarkable areas where there's pockets of breathable air that have been produced in completely sealed off areas that the only way in is by water. And we've seen unique evolutions in those areas of like there's all sorts of unique albino variations on some things that like can't see and stuff that they've discovered in areas where it's been thousands of years since anyone was there because it's been submerged underwater, and then this unique gift of physics and nature comes together to create this air pocket that's then replenished by fungi. Fungi? Why did I say it with a J? Fungi or algae or any of those, and they've created this self-regulated cycle. There's nothing to suggest that that's not possible elsewhere on a much larger scale. And once you consider the possibility of a species that's developed a little bit, like at least to what we have now, or a little bit further past that, you then have to take into account, okay, now you have the ability to mold that environment, and you could really take it places. There's nothing to suggest that that's not totally feasible. Now, it would really depend on the as far as the development of the culture and stuff, it would really depend on the natural resources Nibiru would have to offer. From everything that's said in the stories and stuff that I've come across, the thing that they harbored for the most is gold. It was the thing that was treasured. It was the thing that they wanted when they came to Earth. As far as these stories go, everybody take it with a grain of salt. Sorry about the background noise. Everybody take it with a grain of salt. I'm just kind of passing along information. But it stands to reason that even if Nibiru did once have plentiful amounts of gold, that it wouldn't anymore because they used a bunch of it. But assuming it was strong in other resources, metal, iron, copper, natural stuff like coal or fossil fuels, who knows if the Annunaki were the first life to develop on Nibiru. So there could be any number of things like that, considering how far outside the solar system and the unique ways in which the planet's supposed to work. We could be talking about a civilization that discovered nuclear power before they discovered trains. I mean, it's very possible. It would be hard to really gauge that. And because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it's a dark mass, if it's even still there, and if it was even still like inhabitable or detectable, okay, what's the deal? It would be very hard to tell without more knowledge, like exactly how feasible it is. But assuming that they had roughly the same amount of expectation of like natural resources that we do, it would be feasible that they could survive. The biggest variation, I think, would be on they they would probably not have any sort of plant life we would recognize. Um, Photosynthesis would only be able to occur on a very natural sense when the planet was nearing into the middle of the solar system. So any other time period, they would probably chiefly be reliant on plants of chemosynthesis. For those of you who don't know what chemosynthesis is, I can't say the word. Like, um, it's basically it's like photosynthesis in plants. And for those of you who don't know what photosynthesis is, it's just how plants turn light into food. Chemosynthesis is the same thing, but it's a chemical reaction only. It has nothing to do with photonic radiation at all. So, in all likelihood, the Annunaki would be sustained on obviously any animal life that might develop, but would probably mostly be sustained on chemosynthetic vegetable life. I just said any plants, didn't I? Fungi, and any animal life. I guess I said did I say animal life? Yeah, any animal or plant life that would have developed, but they would be vastly different than anything we see on Earth. There might be some times where they're able to cultivate something with photosynthesis, and once they achieved artificial lighting, they could achieve photosynthesis with ease, but it would stand to reason that they would be more likely to be fed off of things like radioactive fungi and stuff like that. The sorts of things that you could find on a harsh surface, exposed to radiation quite a bit. Yeah, it wouldn't be something that would really resemble Earth all that much. There's also the possibility that they wouldn't have liquid water, but they'd have something else liquid. But that's a hard one to gauge, really. Again, having to know more about the position of the planet and the resources that are on it. As far as a technological standpoint, I think that once they became aware of their position in the cosmos, I think the first order of business probably would have been to quickly proceed as fast as possible to looking at other places they could go. Which it would kind of make sense if they came to that realization around the same time that they were getting close enough to see the Earth and see Mars. I think both of them would have looked enticing to them. Now, I can talk a little bit more about this later, but I'm very strongly a supporter of the whole idea that Mars is not where it originally used to be, and was probably much more habitable, maybe not even that long ago. But because of the shit that's happened to it, it's degraded. But anyway, if we're talking millions of years ago anyway, that's outside of argument anyway, probably. So it would make sense from a cultural standpoint for them to try to stem out and collect these natural resources that they were finally within range of after all these years. And so it would make sense for them to want these natural resources and to be willing to do things for them. The act of getting from planet to planet can be difficult, as we know. So I think it's very possible that the few starters probably just crashed. Because usually it takes a little bit to get the ball running on learning how to do rockets. Um, but I think they could do it as long as it all comes down to as long as they have the physical means. Um, Now, upon the question of okay, well, if there's a life out there, why don't we hear them? I have kind of vouched for this every single time that I've talked about advanced civilizations. People don't like to think we're backward. But the fact of the matter is that radio communication is primitive on a cosmic scale. Um, for the kind of scales that we exist on right now, even now, we're beginning to find the futility in trying to go to Mars and having communication systems that'll take 40 minutes round trip for two-way communication. I think the shortest time you can get it down to is like 17 minutes or something. And that's like direct line of sight, which 9/10 of the year does not happen. So it's like, it's absurd. Like, anybody who goes to Mars right now, they have to be able to think for themselves, obviously, but like, if there's an emergency, they have to decide whether or not it's a scrub or not. Because there's nothing that Earth can do to help. I mean, aside from the fact that even if we had 3 rockets ready to go, and say we already had people on the surface, say we already had 3 ships that were ready to go, but they were still on Earth, and there's some like big storm or something, and like the hab sets on fire, there's nobody to save them. It would take us months at our current rate of speed, if not years, to get one ship to Mars. That would all depend on where in the orbits it all lined up. Not to mention supplying the ship. But, like, okay, so let's say the ships were ready to go. The soonest somebody would be there would be months away. The soonest somebody would be able to respond would be almost an hour away. Because it would take 20 minutes to get the message from Mars. And a lot of the time, if it's a serious situation like that, 20 minutes is all it takes. There's no difference being made by sending the message, aside from letting somebody know that it happened. But usually, by the time it's time for like a resolution, you're not going to have a reply from Earth. So it stands to reason that the further away the 2 entities of an intelligent species are, the more efficient the way they would wish to communicate. Now, I've got several theories of my own as far as deciphering ways to do subspace communications or electrosonic wavelengths or anything like that. But it stands to reason that a species that would have the kind of abilities, technologically speaking, of a species like the Annunaki would have probably moved away from radio signals long before we got around to using radio signals. And that's why we don't hear them. But I can go on for days about as far as like our backwards thoughts about the universe. As far as some of the more questionable bits about the Anunnaki, now this is going to veer a little bit into like some of the stories. They are said to live a long time, and that can both be due to their own natural makeup, as well as the manipulation of substances to keep them strong and to keep them fit and whatever. That isn't out of the question. I don't pretend to be digging the dirt from the Philosopher's Stone, but I'm not going to say that there's not evidence to suggest that there are some health benefits to. So I guess I should explain this real quick. The substance to which is referred to, like the way that the Anunnaki extend their lives is a substance called white powder gold, or monospin clay. I don't remember what the other reference is. But it's supposedly it's the proverbial stuff that the elixir that the Philosopher's Stone can make is supposed to be made out of. Anyway, whatever truth may be in that aside, that's the big reason why gold was such a big thing. So there are health benefits in small quantities to ingesting gold. There are also health dangers. It's why people don't generally do it in large quantity. I believe it was the Roman Emperor Nero who ended up getting gold poisoning. I'd have to double check that, but I do know one of the ancient emperors of the ancient world did get gold poisoning. It is a heavy metal, so that's something to be kept in mind. But there's nothing to say that, especially in a different physiognomy, that there's nothing in that wouldn't do something, because there probably is. And with the ability to manipulate matter on a much more effective level than us, there's probably a lot that can be done with it. And we just tend to think of things in like our own square neck of the woods sort of bit, but like there's nothing that stops another race from living 10 times as long as we do. It all has to do with what their body does. They may be so saturated in cosmic rays that their body has a natural reservoir of radioactive energy that takes hundreds of years to dematerialize, or to break down. Think of it like a half-life to like actually break down. And given that extra radiation and so on, also makes a certain amount of sense towards the fact that, from all accounts, it does seem that they do tend to have significantly amplified mental abilities and so on and so forth. The normal kind of stuff you see from ancient aliens pretending to be gods sort of stuff. And I'm not going to speak one way or the other about that. I think it's perfectly believable, but I'm not going to try to argue that here. This is about feasibility, not what I think. It would be feasible under those conditions with higher levels of radiation and any number of things that might have had to come up just in their natural evolution. That it's very possible that they would have more highly complex brains. They may not even be carbon-based. They could be silicon-based. There's a couple other unique atomic strains that, under the right conditions, could form multicellular organisms. So they might not necessarily have to be based in the same way that we are. In which case, they would have abilities and parts of their anatomy that would not have to make sense on a human scale, because it just it wouldn't apply. It wouldn't be something that would happen in a carbon chain necessarily, but might happen in a silicon chain or in a different mixture. And DNA is a roll of the dice as well, and we have to remember that. Regardless of what form that DNA takes, whether it's got carbon in there, whether it's got silicon in there, whether it's got sulfur as part of its base, it wouldn't matter. It's such a gambling game, and unique at that. And if you add other elements in as the blockchain by which those amino acids are based, then you end up with new and unique amino acids which aren't found anywhere else. So they can have any number of unforeseen variations, alterations, you know. But I think as far as extra abilities go, it's far within reach to imagine that, yeah, at the very least, heightened psionic state, you know, mental abilities, far beyond that of which we could perceive today. It could very well be the case that they may not even be able to speak if they were still existent today. They may just be chiefly telepathic. But it's hard to tell. But yeah, as far as feasibility goes, there's not really a lot to suggest that it wouldn't be feasible. It is outlandish. It is far out there. But it is not impossible. But yeah, I don't know if there's much else I can really say on the matter, though. Not without really going deep down just into the Annunaki themselves as just a topic, but I do want to put out there, and I might use this as reference in the future, that when referring to life in our solar system, that doesn't have to just include our own. Since we refer to our solar system as the Sol system, perhaps any life that's from the Sol system should be called the Solan life. I don't know. Solar? Solan? Solaran just kind of sounds like we're adapting the word solar. Although I guess Sol does too, because it's just kind of the Spanish word for sun. It's because the Latin word for sun. I'm getting down into language again. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy my stuff. If you do, please make sure to slap that like button. Let me know that you did. Don't forget to support the channel and everything I do over on Patreon, patreon.com/XenTime. And I'll catch you guys later. Don't scale and chill them out. I'll see you when I see you. Peace!